I'm pro-choice because it saves lives.
I'm pro-choice because I don't believe a man or anyone has the right to tell a woman what she should do with her body.
I'm pro-choice.
Should have given you the gag
abortion
reflex.
bans
Heads up.
endangers women's lives.
Listen to this.
I'm pro-choice because reproductive health is health.
Because
Reproductive
our
health.
daughters deserve choices.
Because reproductive
Daughters.
rights are human rights.
And a woman has the right
Woman.
to determine what she does with her
She,
own body,
her
including
body.
her sexual and reproductive health.
I'm pro-choice because women should have the right
Women.
to choose a safe and legal abortion with privacy and dignity. Because a woman's right to choose what she does with her
Woman.
body is her choice,
Her choice.
and her choice alone.
Her choice
Because
alone.
a woman's autonomy over her own body is not only a human
Autonomy.
right, it's her right.
Human right.
Je suis pro-choix parce que ça ne devrait pas
Que
être
je
aux hommes de
déteste cet
décider
homme.
ce que les femmes
Je déteste
peuvent.
cet homme, c'est incroyable. Je vais traduire ce qu'il dit. I'm going to translate what he says right here. This is the former Minister of Heritage, Guilbeault.
Her right.
Je suis pro-choix parce
I'm pro-choice because
que ça ne devrait pas être aux hommes de
it shouldn't be for men
décider
to decide
ce que les femmes
what
peuvent et
women
veulent faire
can
de leur corps.
and should do to their
Comme
bodies.
québécoises et canadiennes, les femmes se sont trop battues pour avoir des choix et
As a Quebec woman, women have fought too hard to have choices, rights, liberté.
des libertés au Canada. C'est pour ça que je suis pro-choix.
I would like to ask this particular woman, l'honorable Diane Leboutillier, how she feels about men in women's locker rooms, for women who have had to fight for their rights. I'd like to ask her that question. Hypocrisy. Oh, it makes you want to gag.
I'm pro-choice because a woman's right to choose is her choice.
Her choice.
And her choice
Her
alone.
choice alone.
I'm pro-choice because it's a human right.
Human
I'm
right.
pro-choice because I
It seems that there might be an obvious question there as to what other humans might also potentially have rights, even if you agree with the woman's right to choose.
believe that women's rights are human rights.
Because women should have the right to choose what happens to their own reproductive health.
I'm pro-choice. Can't do it. Can't do it. Can't keep going on, people. They're pro-choice, by the way. That's the Liberal Party. That's the Liberal Party. But hold on. Hold on. They're pro-choice. And here's what their awful, evil boss has to say. Pro-choice, but they're pro-choice.
If anyone who doesn't have a legitimate medical reason,
no man should be telling a woman what to do with her body
for not getting fully vaccinated, chooses to not get vaccinated, there will be consequences.
That sounds like a man just threatened a woman if she didn't do with her body what he said to do with her body. It's nauseating hypocrisy, nauseating gaslighting. And we're going to come over some of these topics as I talk with Bryce Eddy today, just to highlight a couple of the absurdities here, above and beyond the obvious. They are gaslighting, hypocrite liars. They are, politically speaking, they might be good pet owners. They might be loving parents. They're politically speaking, they are the worst people on earth. And I've tweeted, holy hell, they are the biggest gaslighting hypocrites on earth. All of a sudden, they know what a woman is. All of a sudden, they know what a man is, and a man should not be telling a woman what to do with her body, right up until Justin Trudeau says, if you don't have a damn good excuse, woman, you misogynist anti-vaxxer, there'll be consequences. You know what that's called when a man says that to a woman? And then the bottom line of all of this, for those of you who may not know, Canada is the only nation in the world with absolutely no criminal prohibitions on abortion. Since 1988, when the Supreme Court struck down whatever were the existing abortion laws back then, Canada, this is from Wikipedia, this is from a bunch of sources. I don't know what they mean by the only nation, if that's somehow different than the only country. Canada is the only nation on earth with no criminal prohibitions on abortion. And yet, for some reason, it seems to be the only thing that those raging gaslighting hypocrites in the Liberal Party can talk about now. As though their followers are too stupid to identify a little shiny object to keep you from looking at the actual corruption, the actual insidious heinousness of that liberal regime. All right. I feel better. You feel better? I see our guest in the back, Eddy, Bryce Eddy. I haven't told him this. I might make a mistake on his name because when we adopted Babu, that pug who went blind and got really, really fat, his birth name or his given name was Bryson. And so that's how I've remembered Bryce's name. But then I, in my own head, keep saying Bryson. So Bryce, I'm bringing you in 3, 2, 1.
Hey, how are you?
Good, in yourself?
Good. Well, if you get it wrong, I won't even notice because, having two first names that get interchanged all the time, and I get called Bruce all the time and all those sort of things. So I'm never offended. I don't even think about it.
Well, first of all, it's a good name. I was wondering if it was a stage name or your actual real name. It's your birth name and your original last name.
Yeah. My full name is Bryce Whitfield Eddy. So I was my dad was a pastor and theologian and named me after George Whitfield, who was one of those guys that Ben Franklin said that he avoided bringing his billfold to any of those events because he was so inspiring. He would end up giving all of his money away, and then he did that one time and ended up giving his wristwatch in the collection plate after listening to George Whitfield. So anyway, Bryce Whitfield Eddy.
Now, very cool. Now, Bryce, I'm thinking I want to do it. Yeah, see, well, we're going to have to talk physique in a bit, but I like the zoomed in because we waste space otherwise. Okay, Bryce, some people in my community might not know who you are. And the preface this, we met at the PragerU event where we're at a table. And I don't remember how the discussion got started, but when we're at a table, we started talking, and it turns out, you're actually kind of super cool. We have a lot of overlapping interests, but my crowd might not know who you are. So 30,000 foot overview, then we're going to get into some childhood stuff. Then we're going to get into like the news of the week, the news of the year. Who are you?
Yeah. So, first, how it got started was it was my daughters were doing PR for me because you sat next to my girls and they were having fun, enjoying conversation with you. And then that kind of connected us up, and I realized who you were, and I've been following you on Twitter. So it was a, fun little occurrence. And that's why we go to those events.
Yeah. Well, actually, I should say I was sitting at a table. I show up with my wife. There's four, equally young looking women. One of which was your wife. You had 4 kids there and your wife. It was 3 kids and your wife.
Yeah, it was my 3 daughters, which are 19, 18, and 14, and then my wife. And my girls are all high-level violinists. We've homeschooled them for years, which is something I like to talk about and endorse. And they're just wonderful, and they're just kicking butt in life.
Amazing. So actually, hold on. I actually just want to show everybody today. I was going to go with a Red Bull, but I figure I'm going to save my Red Bull for this afternoon. This is my how it started, how it's going mug that my wife made for me. All right, Bryce, we're going to get into homeschool. We're going to get into all of the homeschooling, but okay.
Yeah,
because you have a podcast now, but you didn't start in this milieu.
Yeah. So I fell into this, and it was really an accidental thing. And like a lot of folks during the lockdowns, the life got kind of shut down, and the world got a little crazy. And so I've always been an entrepreneur. I've been business owner, multiple different things. One time my daughter asked, like, "Hey, Dad, what do I say when people ask what you do for a living?" And I just said, tell them I'm a many-layered onion. And so I've been in the insurance business for many years, on the corporate insurance side of things, and we sold our business a few years ago, and I'm still active in that space. But during 2020, I got involved in for the last decade, I've also been in the security consulting business, and I've owned a martial arts school. I'm a Brazilian Jiu-jitsu guy. Been at that for 27, 28 years, something like that. I was actually classmates with Joe Rogan and many guys that people know in that world or associate in even our world in podcasting. And then during the lockdowns, we ran a live stream 7 days a week out of our church, which stayed open during the pandemic in defiance of California authorities, kind of fought them and won. And I was a regular guest on that. And then Salem suggested we do a regular podcast. We started doing the podcast. Rob McCoy, who was our pastor and my co-host at the time, did 4 episodes with me, went on vacation, went to Israel, and then never returned to the show. So it by default became mine. And I'm doing just the interview thing, having fun with people that I like, interacting about topics. But really, I'm interested in people, and I'm interested in the people in this movement. Of course, I get called a white supremacist, Nazi, Christian nationalist, stochastic terrorist, Christo-fascist. and everything else, which is of course silly slander that the left tries to use to shut us up. The most hate I've gotten is because I said publicly that it is evil to tell children that happiness lies on the other side of puberty blockers and double mastectomies. And of course, that is one of those sacred things that if you start talking about that, you get Antifa characters mailing things to your home.
So let's back it up a little more before we get into the issues. Like, born and raised in California?
Yeah, I was actually born in Philadelphia, but we came over. My parents were going to school there. My dad, as I said, was a theologian and was going to Westminster Theological Seminary. And then we moved back here where they were from. And so I was raised from, 8 or 9 years old here in the Southern California area.
And you are, if I may ask, how old are you?
48.
48. So now you've been in California for your entire life, basically, or the better part of your life.
I'm a California boy.
What has been the transition, geopolitically in California since you got there or since you were there as a child compared to today?
Well, I mean, everything has kind of over time gotten further, rotting to its core. It's interesting because, when the California that I grew up in, and I've said this publicly and it's gotten me in trouble, like racism wasn't a thing in my youth. Like, we went to a school, they, bust kids in from, the urban environment. We were all friends. There was no kind of like thing about it. It just really did not exist. We were all friends. We were all like living life. I grew up in a way where it was that Martin Luther King idea that, it's about the content of character. And then all of a sudden now, everything has become about those sorts of issues. And they've, ginned up this way of dividing us like crazy. And it's really continued. If you travel outside of California, I own land and properties in Idaho. And when you go there, the environment seems so different. And then you come back here and you realize that California is kind of a rotting corpse, just with nice weather.
Nice weather and absolutely beautiful geography. It's a damn shame because it's the most, setting aside the forest fires and the earthquakes, geologically one of the most beautiful places on earth. Some people, and I'll play devil's advocate here, Bryce, are going to say that you didn't see the racism because of your white privilege, and the fact that you didn't see the racism. Like I compare what you're describing to my childhood. Born and raised in Montreal. Canada doesn't have as big of a black population as America does. I went to Jewish school, so no black students in Jewish school. But then when I went to my second of 3 high schools, there were a few, and nobody cared about race. It wasn't a constant subject of discussion, not among kids, and as far as I recollect, not among adults. I presume that's your same experience. When do you recall it? I mean, first of all, did you go to private school or public school in California?
I went to public school. My joke is, all the time I disparage my my intelligence and everything else because I went to public school, and have fun with that. But they graduated me twice, so I left my high school and went to another school halfway through, and ended up going to visit my friends, and all of a sudden they called my name out at my previous high school. So, based on money, they didn't take me off the rolls there, which tells you how effective LAUSD is.
Were you a troublemaking kid?
No, actually, I mean, I was a Boy Scout. I mean, quite literally, I was a LAPD explorer, which was part of the Boy Scouts, and I didn't even have a beer before I was 20 years old. I had no trouble growing up. I mean, I was pretty straight edged kind of a kid, and for the most part, all the trouble that I've gotten in is as an adult.
Okay, so hold on. Religious parents, I presume, based on.
Yeah. Again, my dad, while I was growing up, was a pastor. So, he and my mom, and this is sort of, interesting story. But, my parents were divorced, quite controversial when I was 13, and for a pastor and somebody like that to be getting divorced and go through that trouble is quite a big deal. But my parents ended up getting remarried and back together 1 month before my wife and I got married. And so until my mom died, they were together again.
So, okay, hold on. I think I remember this now. How many siblings did you have, first of all? Or do you
I have a younger sister and a younger brother. And, again, we all grew up here in Southern California.
So your parents got divorced. How old were you, and how long did they stay divorced for before? How does that happen? I mean, how does that happen? Did they have relationships in their divorced life?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'll even lay more. I'll even lay more of it bare. So they divorced when I was 13, and I'm the older kid in the group, and so my younger brother and sister, I think certainly suffered more than I did, being younger than I was. My parents got back together when I was 19 for 1 year, divorced again. My mom had a marriage in between, and then my parents got remarried again for the third time when I was 26. So, it was a love that, they just couldn't give up.
I'm trying to identify who would be the one. If one can attribute, do you attribute responsibility to either one of the two of them, or is this purely a mutual thing that it was just off and on?
My mom had divorced my dad. Look, these things are always very complex, and relationships are complex, and, none of us are perfect. And, it's a tragedy that this sort of stuff happens. But obviously I learned a lot, and, we all have scars from things like that, growing up, and, it's an interesting thing to go through, but it informed a lot of my views, and the importance of family and the importance of keeping intact families is vital. And I think that that's why it's being attacked so much, because if you have divided and broken families, you can abuse people.
Do I want to ask the question? No. Well, first of all, are your parents still alive?
My dad is. My mom died going on 2 years ago. She suffered from Alzheimer's, fairly early onset, and for the last couple of years was suffering. So her finally passing was really a blessing, because she was really having a rough time.
And so, did you harbor any resentment to your parents for the experiences as a child? And if I can ask the really pointed question, did you harbor it more for one parent than for the other?
Yes and no. It depends on the time in my life, because my parents during my younger years, and I think we all do this a little bit. We parents are kind of a stand-in for God in our life when we're very little, right? You look at them; they are your world, your universe. And then when you get older and you start to become an adult, that's when you start to have these challenges with your parents. And so, if you go through something traumatic like that, there's ways in which you're going to lay blame on either party. I didn't talk to my dad for an entire year at one point, until I went through some of my own challenges in life. And I realized that, oh, wait a second, we're all doing this for the first time. We're all going through life for the first time. None of us totally have this thing wired. We're doing our best. And then, forgiving my dad for things that I was frustrated with was, great, thing in restoring our relationship. My mom was a very complicated woman. She, grew up in a bit of a rough way, had some real, trouble when she was young. And so a lot of that, behavior and the challenges that she had in relationships came from that. So, it's very humbling to really understand that none of us are perfect. I mean, that's the funny thing about being a Christian in today's environment. You get attacked all the time, and it's mostly because people are fried about Christians, right? Some Christian did them wrong. Rarely the philosophies of Christianity are the issue in a person's heart. It's usually that somebody did them wrong who proclaimed to be a Christian. But we are all sinful. We are all screwed up. We are all doing what we can to hopefully grow. And so it's a funny kind of dichotomy there.
Very interesting. I had never actually thought about that your parents are a form of a god. Then you have your rebellion from your parents, and then if you're lucky enough and you live long enough, you come back to your parents in the way that many people come back to God. And I'm only contextualizing it in my life. I know that I have taken a religious, not a deviation, but not an abandonment either. maybe a rebellion from what was my religion of birth. And I mean, I'm Jewish, but I know that I now not rebel against, but take issue with some of the elements of organized religion, while absolutely understanding the value of having these underlying principles from the Old Testament, from the New Testament, from the Bible. Interesting. I'm gonna have to digest that one personally.
Well,
Later on.
let me give you the Bible verse on that. So, it says, "Train your child up in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." And I think this is a beautiful Bible verse when you're talking about kids. Number one, it's saying that okay, we have a duty to train them up in these moral ways and in these foundational ways, right? It says that when they are old, they will not depart from it. Almost all of us have a rebellious period. And I try to encourage other parents that what your whole job is during the screwy years when they are teenagers, or even younger sometimes when they're rebelling, to be firm, to be stable, to be, strong, for them. But you got to get them through those screwy years without any permanent damage. That's really the goal. And they will come back around if you do a good job. And hey, it may be that they're coming back around when they're 35, and all of a sudden they're restored. The other part of that is it says train them up in the way that they should go, meaning that we have jobs as parents to identify who that kid is. Like, who did God make them to be? Don't make them little yous, right? Don't try to make them a mini me. Find out what their strengths are. Pour into those strengths. Help them mitigate against their weaknesses. And then just pour into that stuff. And it's our entire job is to identify it.
I want to bring this up. I'm not making fun of this person, Ken Paddock. It's a sentiment that many people have. Religion is the opiate of the masses. I think that was that Karl Marx? And once upon a time, I thought the same thing. But now I'm having witnessed what I've witnessed in society as a whole. I'm now realizing it's not for people who can't think for themselves. It's the original self-help book, guidance book that everybody does need. And whether you get it from Aesop's Fables or you get it from the Bible, if you don't get it, what ends up happening is you lack basic fundamental principles of life, which reflect in what I think is the breakdown of society that we're witnessing today. But we're jumping ahead. Before we get there, and this is not going to be an entire discussion of religion either. High school, okay. What did you study in university? And when did you step into, being a public figure of sorts? Was that new to COVID, or did you have something, were you in this sphere before?
Yeah. So first, I never finished my schooling, which of course, is used, to detract. But I actually read books and I actually study. And but I found school to be, boring. It felt like 13th grade to me, and I had an opportunity to go into business, and I became successful in that arena pretty quickly. But I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm super curious about things. And so, for me, I love philosophy. I love political philosophy. In my years prior to, becoming a small public figure, I was in the background supporting, I got close to politics when I was young, and realized that all these people, there's something a little off with people who even run for HOA board, right? There's a little something that they have that they want to amass and accumulate power. But, it's a necessary thing that we have. Politics just simply means how we organize ourselves. Well, certainly we have to organize ourselves, and we need people who govern. And so I supported certain politicians behind the scenes, even being disaffected by the whole entire game of it. I think both political parties have dramatically failed us. We're where we're at because of both. Dennis Prager says, I'm a member. He says, we have two parties, the evil party and the stupid party, and I'm a member of the stupid party. And that's kind of how I view it. But I stepped into this, I'm on a number of boards. I'm on the board for one of the largest youth organizations, conservative youth organizations in the country. I've been behind the scenes as a contributor to many of these organizations. And then during 2020, I had Dennis Prager's company party in my backyard. Nobody else could, host anything anywhere. And I have an entertainer's backyard, and we also did weddings and different things. And so I've been close to a number of these organizations, and then just started falling into podcasting and speaking out. I mean, I didn't even have social media prior to about a year ago. I mean, I had accounts, but I never posted or did any of that.
Yeah, some people view it as falling in, and others view it as being pushed in. And I think I feel more like I've been pushed in by the forces of nature, but it doesn't mean you can't jump in once you realize that's where the wind is blowing or the pressure is coming from. Let me just see something here. I'll bring this one up real quick. I believe religion helps integrate the understanding that there is something greater than oneself into our persona, and that links self-sacrifice to the good of all. A religion wanes, selfishness. As religion wanes, selfishness has risen.
That comment is right, except for here's what I think people do not understand. Right now, what we are battling is largely a religion. Okay, there is this cultist movement of leftists that is this, they pretend that they have no religion, and yet they're adopting all of these religious pillars. And if you either believe it all or you're out. And it's very much a cult movement. Nobody lays that out better than James Lindsay, but it is super clear. And I've argued, and of course this has got me called a Christian nationalist, but I've argued that we have to have some foundational religion that reigns supreme in a culture. And Western democracies in the Western world was underpinned by Judeo-Christian understanding of the world, and that foundation combined with that Athenian, real kind of structure at the same time. It was that intersection that allowed us to be as prosperous as we are. Now, of course, that means I want a theocracy and, I'm going to subvert, everybody. I mean, that's their idea. But of course, that nothing further from the truth. We enjoy liberty more in the West than anywhere else, precisely because that's actually Christian philosophy, is for us to have maximum liberty and make our choices before God, because he ultimately will judge us.
We're going to get back into this. We're going to do one last subject on YouTube before we go over to Rumble. Sorry, and I just inhaled my own saliva while drinking, which I should not drink coffee while doing streams. Mixed martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-jitsu. How'd you get into that? Talk about it a little bit. The value that has brought to your life, and why everyone should do it.
Yeah, so I went through a stressful period in my life when I was in my early 20s, and going to the gym and eating the weights just did not satisfy enough of that angst. And in 1993 they had the UFC, which was organized by the Gracie family to display Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I didn't realize that there was their cousins, the Machado family, which they all grew up together. It's the same family. They grew up on the same compound. They were, brothers and cousins and all that stuff. They came over here and developed a school right around the corner from where I was living and working at the time. And I discovered it. Somebody referred me like, oh no, here it is. And back in those days, it just said RCJ Machado and their telephone number. So you would never know it was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or anything like that. But I discovered it. And I tell you, there's nothing like choking someone to relieve after work stress. So, and then I discovered, there's a reason that almost all of the adherents to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu are successful. And the reason is because you learn to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. You can't think of anything else when you are on the mat and somebody's trying to submit you to their will, and vice versa. So as far as stress relief, that alone is amazing. It also teaches you a superpower. And that's one of the things that I say to incoming students. I say, hey, give us a year and we'll give you a superpower. And what I mean by that is, if you learn to handle yourself physically in that way, number one, your confidence will go through the roof, right? You will walk differently through life. You will move through life in different ways, just that alone. And I'm talking 1 year minimum effective dose. You will then be able to handle physically 99% of the people, 98, 99% of the people on the planet. You will be able to escape from situations. It's why it's the best martial arts for women, because it will make their way of escape. It will give them the means to get out of a situation that's dangerous. And everybody right now who is opposed to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is saying one thing in their heads. Oh, yeah, well, what about multiple attackers? Okay, nothing really works for multiple attackers except for the ancient art of running away. And that's the truth. And old school Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu people do not pull guard onto the ground and lay down while somebody soccer balls their head. No, we get out of the situation.
All right, this is going to segue into a question of I didn't mention we would talk about it, but it's coming up about chokeholds and recent news. Let's mosey on over to Rumble exclusively, people. Rumble and locals, and end it on YouTube. I'm going to put the link to Rumble in here, and I have got some comments here that I actually do want to answer or ask the questions and answer them. Ending on YouTube, people. Make it on over to Rumble, where we shall continue and talk about the Neely thing. If you have an opinion on that, Bryce.
Yeah.
Removing from YouTube. 3, 2, 1 now.